You lose your phone and you tear your house apart looking for it. You retrace your every step. Your brain absolutely hates the unsettling feeling of a physical object simply disappearing without a logical trace. It demands an answer. But what happens when an entire advanced civilization vanishes in a single night? You stand on the beach and stare out at the crashing waves. You watch the dark water swallow the horizon. The deep blue ocean holds onto its secrets with a cold and unforgiving grip that terrifyingly reminds you of your own fragile mortality. It hides shipwrecks in the abyss. Why has this one specific submerged story fascinated humanity for thousands of years? You have heard the name whispered since you were a little kid. You have seen it splashed across comic books and movie posters. The lost city of Atlantis is the ultimate unsolved puzzle that your mind desperately wants to assemble and solve. It is a legend built on extreme wealth and catastrophic hubris. How did the greatest ancient empire on Earth become nothing more than a ghost story? The legend does not actually start at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. It begins on dry land in ancient Greece. A brilliant philosopher named Plato sits down to write his famous dialogues around the year 360 before the Common Era. He puts ink onto parchment. Did he ever suspect that his fictional words would completely hijack human history? You open the ancient texts known as Timaeus and Critias. You scan the fading Greek letters on the page. Plato writes about a massive island empire located just beyond the Pillars of Hercules that possessed naval supremacy over the known world. He claims the story was passed down through generations. What if the most famous missing city in the world was never supposed to be a literal place? You look closer at the true context of these old documents. You realize they are deeply political conversations. A respected classicist named Professor James Romm points out that Plato was likely inventing a brilliant moral allegory to warn his fellow citizens about the dangerous rot of imperial greed. He was holding up a mirror to society. Could the greatest archaeological mystery just be a very ancient form of political propaganda? You see how the narrative is beautifully structured as a heavy warning? You realize Athens is the true hero of the story? Plato contrasts his perfect and disciplined ideal society of ancient Athens against a wealthy and technologically advanced superpower that has completely lost its moral compass. He paints a picture of extreme arrogance. Why do you still want to believe that this fictional enemy was absolutely real? Your imagination takes over anyway because the descriptions are incredible. You close your eyes and picture the breathtaking capital city. Plato describes a stunning piece of urban engineering, consisting of perfect concentric rings of alternating land and water that spiral outward. He details massive stone walls coated in precious metals. How could anyone completely invent something with such precise architectural detail? You imagine walking across the massive interconnecting stone bridges. You watch gigantic merchant ships sailing through the deep artificial canals. The city is a bustling hub of international commerce completely protected by high defensive walls and a heavily armed military guard. It sounds like a prehistoric utopia. Could ancient humans have actually pulled off this level of advanced civil engineering? You stand in the center of the innermost island. You tilt your head back to stare at the grand temple of Poseidon. This monumental structure is coated entirely in bright silver, while its soaring pinnacles are heavily layered with pure shimmering gold. It is an overwhelming display of absolute wealth. What kind of society builds an entire temple out of the most valuable resources on the planet? You notice a strange reddish glow coming from the inner walls. You step closer to inspect this mysterious alien material. Plato calls this precious metal orichalcum and claims it was mined directly from the island and gleamed like hot burning fire in the sunlight. It is a detail that has obsessed treasure hunters for centuries. Did a highly advanced lost element actually power their society? You watch the citizens of this empire slowly change over time. You see their noble divine nature dilute and fade away. The people of Atlantis become consumed by a ruthless thirst for power, and they begin launching brutal military conquests against their peaceful neighbors across the sea. They completely lose their spiritual discipline. Why does every great golden age eventually collapse under the crushing weight of its own greed? You look up at the sky as the dark clouds begin to gather. You feel the heavy judgment of the gods descending on the island. Zeus looks down upon the corrupt and wicked civilization and decides to completely wipe their existence from the face of the earth as the ultimate punishment. He summons the full wrath of nature. How long does it take to erase 1,000 years of progress? You feel the solid ground suddenly violently shake beneath your feet. You hear the deafening roar of the ocean rising up. In a single terrible day and night of endless earthquakes and catastrophic floods, the entire continent of Atlantis is swallowed by the sea. It sinks entirely into the muddy depths. Can a global superpower truly be deleted from reality in just 24 hours? You wake up from the daydream and return to the modern world. You realize that explorers have never stopped looking for this sunken treasure. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine that desperately tries to match Plato's ancient descriptions to real geographical anomalies scattered across the globe. You pull out a massive map. Where's the most logical place to start digging for an ancient drowned civilization? You point your finger at the endless sands of Mauritania. You zoom in on a satellite image of the harsh western Sahara Desert. There is a massive geological formation stretching 25 miles across that looks exactly like a giant staring blue eye carved into the crust of the earth. It is completely isolated in the barren wasteland. Could a sunken ocean city actually be hiding, completely dried out in Africa? You trace the deep circular ridges of this bizarre geological feature. You learn it is formally called the retrace structure. The alternating rings of raised rock and sunken sand perfectly match the concentric circles of land and water described down to the exact measurements in the ancient texts. It is an eerie visual coincidence. Why does the middle of the desert look exactly like the lost island of Atlantis? You imagine the Atlantic Ocean once flowing completely over North Africa. You picture ships sailing right into the eye of the Sahara. Geologists insist this structure is just a naturally eroded volcanic dome that has existed for over 100 million years and was never submerged during human history. Your brain still wants to connect the dots. What if the scientists are wrong and the desert hides the greatest secret ever told? You move your finger across the map toward the Mediterranean Sea. You land on a beautiful little Greek island known as Santorini. This crescent-shaped paradise is actually the jagged rim of a massive dormant volcano that violently blew itself apart thousands of years ago. It is a paradise built on a powder keg. Could this real historical catastrophe be the true spark that ignited the legend of Atlantis? You travel back in time to the height of the Bronze Age. You meet the Minoans, who were a highly advanced trading civilization. They built massive multi-story palaces with indoor plumbing and beautiful frescoes on the nearby island of Crete long before the rest of Europe figured out basic architecture. They were the dominant sea power of their time. Did Plato base his fictional empire on this very real and very dead society? You feel the ground shake just like the ancient stories described. You watch the sky turn completely black with thick volcanic ash. In the 1930s, a brilliant Greek archaeologist named Spiridon Marinatos proposed that a massive eruption at Santorini created catastrophic tsunamis that utterly wiped out the Minoan coastal cities. He uncovered incredible ruins preserved perfectly under the ash. Is this the exact disaster that traumatized the ancient world into remembering Atlantis? You picture a 100-foot-tall wall of dark water. You watch it crash into the beautiful coastal cities of Crete. The total destruction of such an advanced and wealthy naval power in a single, horrifying geological event would easily inspire generations of terrifying oral traditions across the Mediterranean. It perfectly matches the timeline of a civilization wiped out overnight. Why do we stubbornly refuse to accept this logical and scientifically backed explanation? You look westward toward the open, terrifying vastness of the Atlantic Ocean. You navigate toward the legendary waters of the Bermuda Triangle. Decades of wild internet theories and late-night TV documentaries have desperately tried to convince you that ancient submerged mountain ranges exist near the Azores. They claim these are the sunken peaks of the lost continent. Why do people ignore the Mediterranean and search the middle of nowhere? You scan the sonar readings of the deep Atlantic floor. You see absolutely nothing but flat plains and ordinary tectonic ridges. Modern bathymetry has completely mapped the ocean floor and conclusively proven that no sunken continent is hiding beneath the waves where the myths claim it should be. The science is entirely definitive. Will hard data ever actually stop a determined human being from believing in magic? You log on to the internet and scroll through endless discussion boards. You see how the legend has dramatically mutated over the past century. Atlantis has become totally synonymous with conspiracy theories involving lost high technology and crystal energy grids that supposedly powered ancient flying machines. It is a complete hijacking of the original Greek text. When did a philosophical warning about greed turn into a sci-fi story about free energy? You dive deep into the psychology of modern fringe beliefs. You read the fascinating work of an archaeologist named Kenneth Feder. He explains that modern humans suffer from a psychological bias where we severely underestimate the intelligence of our ancestors and prefer to credit their achievements to lost magic or ancient aliens. We cannot handle the idea that primitive people were just as smart as we are. Why does your ego demand that ancient wonders require supernatural explanations? You sit back and watch how the culture absorbs this myth. You see Atlantis woven into the very fabric of our entertainment. We imagine glowing crystal spires and underwater domes inhabited by hyper-advanced beings who somehow survived the great cataclysm by evolving gills. We project our own modern technological anxieties onto a fake ancient past. What does our obsession with lost golden ages actually say about our current fear of the future? You walk into a dark movie theater and grab a seat. You watch massive Hollywood blockbusters featuring comic book heroes like Aquaman from DC and Namor from Marvel fighting in glorious underwater kingdoms. These colorful pop culture adaptations strip away the original heavy moral lesson and replace it with pure escapist fantasy and glowing tridents. It is a spectacular visual feast. How did a sobering story about political corruption become a playground for superheroes? You walk out of the theater and look up at the night sky. You realize that Atlantis is basically a mirror reflecting whatever humanity needs it to be at any given moment. For Plato, it was a strict warning about political overreach and the dangers of imperial arrogance. For modern society, it is a comforting fairy tale about hidden magic waiting to be discovered. Why is a beautiful lie always so much easier to swallow than a boring truth? You take a deep breath of the cool evening air. You understand now that the city never actually existed in the physical world. The true tragedy is not that a glorious civilization sank beneath the unforgiving ocean waves in a single night of fire and earthquakes. The real tragedy is that we still possess the exact same greed and destructive arrogance that Plato was trying to warn us about thousands of years ago. Are we currently building our own modern Atlantis? You finally head back home and walk through the front door. You toss your phone onto the table where it belongs. Your brain absolutely hates the unsettling feeling of a physical object simply disappearing without a logical trace. It demands an answer. But what happens when the thing that vanishes is simply an old story you used to believe?